Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be tackling something uh, pretty fascinating.
Yeah, this should be fun.
You guys have challenged us with the future of public transport,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically, we're going to be diving into rail versus road-based systems.
Right.
So which one is going to dominate the future?
Big question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to unpack all of this,
Okay.
we've got some great sources to dissect. We have excerpts from a book called Eingefickter Text,
Mm-hmm.
and we've also got a fascinating FAQ from Schiene Verkehrs. Schiene versus Schienenlos.
Oh, very good. Very good
It
sources.
should be good.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think about all of this whole debate of rail versus road? It seems like every few years someone declares that, like, the end of the road is near for rail.
It's true. It's true.
But then you look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And high-speed rail lines are booming in places like China.
Yeah.
And even in the U.S., where passenger rail has really kind of languished,
Right.
there's some renewed interest.
Yeah, there is. It seems like a debate that's been going on for a long time, though.
It really has. It makes me think that maybe framing it as rail versus road is too simplistic.
Yeah.
You know, maybe the future isn't really about one replacing the other,
Right.
but about how they can work together.
Exactly. It's
Like-
not necessarily a zero-sum game.
It's not.
Yeah.
So to get to the heart of that,
Okay.
let's
Sure.
define our terms.
Okay. Good idea.
So when we talk about rail-bound systems,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about those systems that rely on fixed tracks for guidance,
Right.
like traditional trains and trams,
Yes.
subways, things like that.
Exactly. Those are very clear-cut. But then you get into the railless systems,
Sure.
and that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
We're talking about everything from bus rapid transit
Mhm.
with dedicated lanes to experimental magnetically guided trams.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Trams without tracks.
Trams without tracks. Think about it.
That's really interesting.
You've got a bus, and it's equipped with sensors that can detect its position relative to a virtual track.
Oh, so it's not bound to a physical track,
No.
but it still operates within a defined...
A defined corridor
Yeah.
or corridor.
Huh.
That's the idea.
What are the advantages of that?
Well, I mean, flexibility is a big one.
Okay.
You can potentially adapt routes more easily to accommodate, changing demand or even bypass obstacles. And then also the initial investment costs can be lower because you're not having to lay down tracks.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Especially in urban environments where space is at a premium and
Yeah, you've got limited space and
construction costs
Yeah.
are high.
exactly.
Yeah. But I want to step back for a moment and look at the historical context here.
Okay.
So Eingefickter Text
All right.
talks about the railroad's revolutionary impact in the 19th century.
All right.
Is that where this clash of the titans began? Rail versus the horse-drawn carriage.
I mean, in a way, yeah. I mean, the railroad just completely changed things. I mean, it allowed for mass transportation of people and goods over long distances at speeds and in quantities that were unimaginable before.
Right.
And that dominance just continued as rail technology evolved.
Yeah.
From steam power to electrification to the high-speed marvels that we see today.
But railless concepts existed back then, too, right?
Yeah.
Weren't there steam-powered buses and early attempts at guided buses?
Absolutely. But those early railless systems faced some pretty significant limitations.
Like what?
Well, especially in terms of power and efficiency.
Okay.
Rail, with its economies of scale and dedicated infrastructure, just had a clear advantage.
Yeah.
Especially for long-distance travel and freight transport. I mean, even today, when you think about traveling between cities or across countries, you often think about rail.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah?
But what about air travel?
Oh, that's a good point.
I mean, hasn't they kind of shifted the equation?
It has for very long distances. Or, when speed is just the absolute priority.
Yeah.
But when you consider, airport security,
Yeah.
baggage handling,
Yeah.
the time it takes to get to and from the airport,
Right.
high-speed rail can often be faster and more convenient for trips, say, up to like 500 miles.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's generally more environmentally friendly, too.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I recently took a high-speed train instead of flying,
Yeah.
and it was so much less stressful.
Absolutely. And as we become more and more aware of the environmental impact of our travel choices, I think we're going to see even greater demand for those sustainable transportation options,
Yeah.
like high-speed rail.
Okay, so rail has this strong track record
Literally.
for long-distance travel.
Yeah.
But where do these railless systems fit into all of this? I mean, they seem well suited for those urban environments.
Right.
But what about, like, the in-between distances, like the regional travel between towns and cities.
That's a great point. That's a really interesting space.
Yeah.
Where both rail and railless solutions are kind of competing for attention.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about the demands of regional transport.
Okay.
You need high frequency of service, so people aren't waiting around forever.
Yeah, no one wants to wait 3 hours for a train.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need routes that connect seamlessly with other modes of transport,
Okay.
like local buses or park and ride facilities.
And accessibility is key, too. Not everyone can drive.
That's a great point.
Public transport should be a viable option
Yeah,
for people of all ages and abilities.
for sure.
And then, of course, you have the economic and environmental consideration.
Right. You need systems that are affordable to operate and maintain, and that ideally have a minimal environmental footprint.
Okay, so how do they stack up?
Well-
Rail and railless.
Well, rail has some inherent advantages in terms of capacity and efficiency. A single train can carry hundreds of passengers.
Yeah.
And electric trains, especially those with regenerative braking, can be incredibly energy efficient.
Oh, I love regenerative braking.
It's a great technology.
It's like getting something back for slowing down.
Exactly.
That's so cool.
But rail also has its downsides.
Okay.
The initial infrastructure costs can be significant,
Yeah.
especially if you're building new lines or tunnels.
Right.
And once those tracks are laid, you're pretty much locked into that route.
Yeah.
You can't just easily adapt the system to accommodate changing travel patterns or new destinations.
Right. And that could be a major drawback, especially in those rapidly growing urban areas
For sure.
where new neighborhoods and business districts are constantly popping up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's
And that's where railless systems start to look really appealing
okay.
because they're not bound by those physical tracks.
Right.
They offer more flexibility to adjust routes or even create entirely new ones as needed.
Yeah.
And the initial investment can be lower,
Okay.
especially if you're leveraging existing road infrastructure.
So they're more adaptable
They are.
to changing circumstances.
Yeah.
But what about capacity?
Ah, there you go. That's the question.
Can a fleet of buses really compete with a multi-car train?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
It's one of the trade-offs.
Yeah.
Individual buses just have a lower passenger capacity than trains,
Right.
but you can compensate for that by increasing the frequency of service
Oh, okay.
or using larger articulated buses.
So it's a balancing act.
It is.
You're weighing the flexibility and lower initial costs
Mhm.
against those potential capacity limitations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, the ideal solution often depends on the specific context.
Yeah.
The size and density of the population, the existing infrastructure,
Mhm.
the projected travel patterns.
It sounds like there's no clear winner.
Not always.
Both have their strengths and weaknesses.
That's right.
But let's dig a little deeper into the technical aspects.
Okay, sure.
I'm curious about this concept of feste Fahrbahn that the FAQ mentions.
Oh, okay.
What's so special about that?
Feste Fahrbahn? It's German.
Okay.
It means fixed track,
Okay.
and it refers to a specific type of rail construction.
Okay.
So instead of laying the rails on a bed of gravel or ballast, which is the traditional method,
Right.
the rails are mounted directly onto concrete slabs.
So it's like building this super smooth, super strong foundation
It is.
for the rails.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of that?
Well, first, it reduces vibration and noise,
Oh,
which is a big plus for both passengers and people living near the tracks.
yeah, that makes sense.
Second, it requires less maintenance because the concrete slabs are more stable than ballast.
Oh, okay.
And third, it can handle higher speeds and heavier loads.
So it sounds like a significant investment up front,
Yeah,
but with those long-term benefits.
exactly.
And that's why it's being used more and more
Mhm.
in these high-speed rail projects around the world.
It is.
Okay. Speaking of high speeds,
Yeah.
Feste Fahrbahn might make those speeds possible on rails,
Right.
but steering a vehicle at 300 kilometers per hour
Oh, yeah.
without tracks?
That's a whole other ball game.
That sounds terrifying.
It's incredibly complex.
Yeah?
I mean, you're talking about a system that has to constantly adjust for things like wind gusts, uneven road surfaces,
Oh, gosh.
even the slightest variations in the vehicle's weight distribution,
Yeah.
and safety is, paramount. I mean, even the smallest error at those speeds could be catastrophic.
Okay, so it's not just about achieving those speeds.
Right.
It's about maintaining that absolute precision
Yes.
and control every second.
Every millisecond.
Yeah. What about the energy demands of these systems?
Okay.
Is there a difference in efficiency between rail and road-based solutions?
There is. Rail generally has an efficiency advantage, especially when you're talking about electric trains.
Right.
And one reason is that steel wheels rolling on steel rails have very low rolling resistance
Okay.
compared to rubber tires on asphalt.
Interesting.
So less friction means less energy is wasted.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
But we're moving towards heavier electric vehicles,
it's a good point.
both on roads and rails.
Yep.
How does
Yep.
that impact efficiency calculations?
That's a great question. As vehicles get heavier,
Yeah.
rolling resistance becomes even more important.
Okay.
But there are ways to mitigate that. For example, some train manufacturers are experimenting with lighter materials
Okay.
for train cars.
Yeah.
And tire manufacturers are constantly working to improve the rolling resistance of tires
Right.
for electric buses and trucks.
So it's like a constant push and pull.
It is.
As technology advances in one area,
Right.
it creates new challenges
Right.
in another.
Absolutely.
But I'm still fascinated by regenerative braking
Oh, it's a great technology.
on electric trains. It's such an elegant solution.
It really is.
You're capturing that energy that would normally be lost
Yeah,
during braking and feeding it back into the system.
it's very clever.
So cool. Why aren't we using this everywhere?
Well, it's not a magic bullet. I mean, it works best when trains are stopping and starting frequently, like in those urban metro systems
Makes sense.
on long-distance routes
Yeah.
where trains maintain a relatively constant speed.
Right.
The benefits are less pronounced.
So it's context dependent.
It is, like so many things.
Yeah. It's fascinating how many factors come into play when we're comparing these systems.
It's a complex issue.
But let's shift gears and talk about the economic side of things.
All right, let's do it.
What are the cost considerations we need to keep in mind when comparing rail and road-based solutions?
Well, it's tempting to just focus on the upfront costs, the price tag of building a new rail line
Right.
versus, say, establishing a bus rapid transit system.
Yeah.
But that's only part of the story.
Okay.
To get a true picture of the economic viability, we need to look at the entire life cycle of a system.
So not just the initial investment,
Exactly.
but the ongoing costs of operation, maintenance,
Yep.
and eventually replacement or disposal.
All of that. And that's where things can get tricky. Take road construction, for example. Asphalt is often cheaper to lay down than concrete.
Okay.
So it might seem like a more budget-friendly option for bus lanes or dedicated roadways,
Right.
but asphalt degrades faster,
Oh, sure.
especially under heavy traffic.
Yeah.
So those seemingly lower upfront costs can be offset by higher maintenance expenses down the road.
Right. You get what you pay for.
Exactly.
A cheaper solution up front might end up costing more over time.
It very well could. That's why life cycle cost analysis is so important.
So how do you account for all those variables? The initial investment, the operating costs,
Yeah.
the lifespan of the system.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it seems very complicated.
It does require a lot of data and careful analysis.
Right.
I mean, you need to project things like ridership, fuel costs, maintenance expenses, even the rate of inflation.
Right.
And you have to consider the lifespan of different components,
Yeah.
the vehicles, the infrastructure,
Right.
the signaling systems.
Yeah.
But luckily, we have these sophisticated modeling software programs that can help with these calculations
Oh, okay.
and provide valuable insights for decision makers.
So it's not just about gut feeling or political expediency.
Right.
There's a science to evaluating this.
Absolutely.
But beyond the pure dollars and cents,
Yeah.
we have to consider the environmental impact, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Transportation is a major contributor to carbon emissions.
It is.
And we need solutions that are both efficient and sustainable.
For sure. And this is where things get really interesting because the environmental equation is constantly evolving as new technologies emerge.
Okay.
For now, rail systems, especially those powered by renewable electricity, have a clear advantage in terms of carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Electric trains are incredibly clean.
Yeah, they are.
And they're only getting cleaner as the electricity grid transitions to renewable sources.
Right.
But you bring up a good point.
Yeah.
What about those non-electrified routes? I mean, we can't electrify every rail line in the world.
Right. Exactly.
So that's where some exciting innovations are happening
Yeah.
in the realm of alternative fuels.
Like what?
Well, battery-powered trains are gaining traction,
Okay.
and hydrogen-powered trains are also showing promise.
Interesting.
These technologies have the potential to replace diesel engines on routes where overhead electrification isn't feasible or cost-effective.
So we're talking about cleaner, quieter trains
Yes.
that can operate on a wider range of roads
Exactly.
without needing those bulky diesel engines.
Yeah, no more diesel fumes.
That sounds really promising.
It is very promising.
What about the infrastructure?
That's a good question.
Do we need to build entirely new fueling stations for these alternative fuel trains?
It depends on the technology.
Okay.
Battery-powered trains can be recharged at existing electrical substations.
So the infrastructure requirements aren't too bad.
Relatively minimal. But hydrogen is a different story. You need a whole network of hydrogen production and distribution facilities,
Right.
which is a significant investment.
Yeah. Is it realistic to think we can create that kind of widespread hydrogen infrastructure anytime soon?
Well, it is a challenge. It's not insurmountable, though.
Okay.
Remember, the transition to a hydrogen-based economy is already underway
Oh, right.
in other sectors,
Yeah.
like heavy trucking and shipping.
Yeah.
So as those industries scale up hydrogen production and distribution, the costs will come down
Makes sense.
and the infrastructure will become more readily available.
Okay.
So it's a long game,
Yeah.
but it really could be a game changer for rail transport.
It's amazing to think about how these seemingly different industries,
Right.
rail, automotive, energy,
All coming together.
they're all converging as we search for these sustainable transportation solutions.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about the passengers in all of this.
The human element.
What are their needs and expectations when it comes to public transport?
Well, that's a great question because I think the expectations for public transport are higher than ever.
Yeah, they really are.
People want it to be fast, reliable, affordable,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, environmentally friendly.
Of course.
Yeah.
Can these systems even live up to those demands?
Well, I think it's important to remember that public transport isn't just about moving people from point A to point B.
Okay.
It's about creating a positive experience.
Right.
Passengers want to feel comfortable, safe, and connected. They want to be able to work,
Yeah.
relax, or even socialize during their commute.
So it's not just about the technology.
Right.
It's about the overall experience.
Exactly. You know, think about those high-speed rail lines we talked about earlier.
Hmm.
They're not just about getting you to your destination quickly.
Yeah.
They're about offering a comfortable and enjoyable journey.
Right.
Spacious seats, Wi-Fi, onboard entertainment.
Yeah. It's all part of it.
All these things contribute to a positive perception of public transport.
Right. And on the railless side,
Yeah.
we're seeing these innovations like bus rapid transit systems with dedicated lanes
Yeah.
and platform-level boarding.
Exactly.
Those features make the experience feel more like riding a train.
They do.
Smooth, efficient,
Right.
less like being stuck in traffic.
What's a better experience all around?
And as automation technology advances,
Yeah.
we might see even more personalized and on-demand transport options.
Well, think about it.
Okay.
Summoning a self-driving pod
Okay.
that takes you directly to your destination,
Right.
weaving seamlessly through a network of larger public transport systems.
It sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It does a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Is that really feasible?
Well, elements of that vision are already being tested in various cities around the world.
Where?
We're seeing on-demand shuttles,
Oh, wow.
autonomous buses,
Interesting.
and even these personalized ride-sharing services that integrate with public transport networks.
So it's not just about rail versus road.
It's not.
It's about blurring the lines
Exactly.
between different modes of transport
Yes.
and creating a truly integrated system.
The seamless system.
And data plays a huge role in this.
It does. By collecting and analyzing data
Yeah.
on passenger flows, traffic patterns,
Yeah.
even weather conditions, we can optimize routes and schedules.
Wow.
Even the deployment of vehicles in real time.
It's like creating a living, breathing transport network
It is.
that adapts to the needs of the city.
That's the vision.
Wow. But data privacy is a big concern these days.
That's a very good point.
How do we ensure that these systems are collecting and using data responsibly?
Well, transparency and user consent are paramount.
Yeah.
Passengers need to understand what data is being collected, how it's being used,
Yeah.
and what benefits they'll receive
Right.
in exchange for sharing that information.
So it's a delicate balance
It is.
between innovation and privacy,
Absolutely.
but one that we need to get right. If we want these systems to gain public trust
For sure.
and acceptance,
Yeah.
let's zoom out for a moment and think about the bigger picture here.
Okay.
So we've discussed this. Both rail and railless systems have their strengths and weaknesses.
Yep.
Is the future about one replacing the other?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it about finding ways for them to coexist and complement each other?
I think the most likely scenario is a hybrid approach,
Okay.
where rail and railless systems work together to
Mm.
create a truly integrated transport network.
Okay.
So, high-speed rail might connect major urban centers,
Right.
while railless systems provide more localized service within cities and towns,
Yeah.
acting as feeders to the rail network.
So it's not about choosing one over the other.
Exactly.
It's about leveraging the strengths of each system
Yeah,
to create a more efficient and sustainable whole.
that's right.
And that requires collaboration, right?
Absolutely. Between governments, transport agencies, technology providers, and even passengers themselves. We need to break down those traditional silos
Yeah.
and work together to create a transport future that benefits everyone.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the history, the technology, the economics,
Yeah.
and even some of the societal implications of rail and railless transport systems.
A lot to think about.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we move on?
I would just encourage listeners to stay curious, engaged in this ongoing debate. The future of transport is being shaped right now,
Right.
and it's up to all of us to demand solutions that are innovative, sustainable,
Yeah.
and truly serve the needs of our communities.
Well said. I want to
Yeah.
thank you for guiding us through this
Oh, it's my pleasure.
first part of our deep dive.
Yeah, this has been fun.
I know I've learned a lot,
Me too.
and I hope our listener has too.
I hope so.
To our listener, we hope this first part has provided you with some valuable insights and maybe even sparked some new ideas.
Yeah, keep those ideas coming.
Yeah. The future of transport is a journey we're all on together.
It really is. We'll see you in part 2.
Sounds good. So where were we?
We were talking about the passenger experience.
Right.
And how important it is.
It's not just about the tech, it's the whole thing.
Exactly. I think a good example of that
Yeah.
is, are those high-speed rail lines that we discussed?
Yes.
They're not just about getting you to your destination quickly. It's
Yes.
about offering, a comfortable and
Yeah.
enjoyable journey.
Exactly.
You've got those spacious seats, Wi-Fi onboard entertainment.
And you can get up and walk around.
Yeah.
You're not stuck in a tiny little seat.
Exactly.
Like-
Hours on end.
And all of those things, they really contribute to a positive
Yeah.
perception of public transport.
They do?
And I think on the railless side,
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing innovations like bus rapid transit systems
Yeah.
with dedicated lanes and platform-level boarding
Right.
that make the experience feel more like riding a train.
It does.
It's smooth, efficient.
less like being stuck in traffic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about automation? As that technology advances,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, are we going to see even more personalized
Oh, I think so.
and on-demand transport options?
Yeah.
Think about it. Like summoning a self-driving pod
Oh, yeah.
that takes you directly to your destination,
Door-to-door service.
weaving seamlessly through a network of larger public transport systems.
I mean, it sounds futuristic.
It sounds like a sci-fi movie.
It does, but elements of that vision are already being tested
Really?
in cities around the world.
Wow.
We've got on-demand shuttles, autonomous buses,
Wow.
even these personalized ride-sharing services that integrate with public transport networks.
So it's not just about rail versus road anymore.
It's not. The lines are blurring
Yeah.
between all these different modes of transport.
And creating a truly integrated system.
A seamless system.
Yeah. And data plays a huge role in all of this.
Well, absolutely. By collecting and analyzing data on passenger flows,
Yeah.
traffic patterns, even weather conditions.
You can optimize everything.
Yeah.
The routes, the schedules, the deployment of vehicles
Real time.
in real time.
Right.
It's like creating a living, breathing transport network that adapts to the needs of the city.
That's the idea.
Wow. But data privacy
Ah, yes.
is a big concern these days.
It's a huge concern.
How do we make sure that these systems are collecting and using data responsibly?
That is the question. Transparency and user consent are paramount.
Yeah.
Passengers need to understand what data is being collected, how it's being used, and what benefits they'll receive in exchange for sharing that information.
So it's a delicate balance
It is.
between innovation and privacy.
Absolutely.
We have to get that right
We do.
if we want these systems to gain public trust
Yeah, people need to trust the system.
and acceptance.
Exactly.
So let's zoom out for a moment
Okay.
and think about the bigger picture.
All right.
We've talked about this.
Yeah.
Both rail and railless systems have their strengths and weaknesses.
They do.
Is the future about one replacing the other?
Mhm.
Or is it about finding ways for them to work together?
I think the most likely scenario is a hybrid approach,
Okay.
where rail and railless systems work together to create a truly integrated transport network. So
Mhm.
high-speed rail might connect major urban centers,
Right.
while railless systems provide more localized service within cities and towns,
Yeah.
acting as feeders to the rail network.
So it's not about picking one or the other.
No,
It's about using the strengths of both
exactly.
to create a more efficient and sustainable system as a whole.
That's right.
And that requires collaboration, doesn't it?
A lot of collaboration.
Between governments, transport agencies, technology providers.
Even passengers themselves.
Yeah, everyone working together.
We need to break down those silos and work together to create a transport future that benefits everyone.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have. It's a big topic.
The history, the technology, the economics, the societal implications
Yeah.
of and realist transport system.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
It is. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
I would just say to our listeners out there, stay curious.
Yeah.
Stay engaged. This debate is ongoing.
Yeah.
The future of transport is being shaped right now.
It is.
And it's up to all of us to demand solutions that are innovative, sustainable, and truly serve the needs of our communities.
Well said. Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
I've learned so much.
Likewise.
And I hope our listener has too.
I hope so too.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some valuable insights.
Yes.
And maybe even sparked some new ideas for you.
Yeah, definitely.
The future of transport is a journey we're all taking together.
It is. Buckle up.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It's a journey. And, it's really interesting to think about like how this is all going to play out
Yeah.
because, on one hand, you have these incredibly powerful forces pushing us towards like more individualized transport.
Right.
People want convenience.
Yeah.
They want flexibility.
And they want control over their travel experience.
They do.
But on the other hand, we're also facing these, really pressing challenges.
Right.
Like climate change, congestion, and social equity.
And those challenges demand that we find ways to move people more efficiently.
Yeah.
And more sustainably.
Good, exact.
So how do we reconcile those seemingly competing forces?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. So what do you think the future holds? I mean, is there going to be some like grand unified theory of transportation?
I don't have a crystal ball,
Right.
but if I had to guess, I'd say that the future of transport is going to be all about finding the right mix
Okay.
of solutions.
Mhm.
It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right.
Different cities and regions are going to need different approaches
Yeah, that makes sense.
based on their unique circumstances.
Okay. So what are some of those like key ingredients that you think are going to shape the future of transportation?
Okay. Well, first and foremost,
We need to embrace technology. I mean, technology is going to be absolutely essential
Right.
for creating more efficient, sustainable, and user-friendly transport systems.
but we have to be mindful of the potential downsides too, right?
Oh, absolutely. We've talked about data privacy
Yeah.
and the need for transparency and user consent.
Right.
But we also need to think about things like cybersecurity
Right.
and the potential for job displacement as automation takes hold.
Yeah, those are big issues.
They are, and they're not going to be easy to solve. But we have to address them head on if we want to create a transport future that benefits everyone.
So technology is one ingredient.
Right.
What else is going to be important?
Well, we also need to rethink our cities and how we design them.
Okay.
For too long, we've prioritized the car
Right.
over other modes of transport.
Yeah, we've built our cities around the automobile.
We have.
Yeah.
And that's led to sprawl,
Right.
congestion,
Right.
and a whole host of other problems.
Okay.
So we need to create cities that are more walkable,
Right.
bikeable,
Yeah.
and transit-oriented.
That's a big shift in thinking.
It is. But it's a shift that we need to make.
Okay. So technology, urban design,
Mm-hmm.
any other key ingredients?
I think the last piece of the puzzle is going to be about changing our mindset as
Okay.
individuals. We need to start thinking about transportation as a shared responsibility.
What do you mean by that?
Well, for one thing, we need to be more willing to embrace alternatives to the private car.
Yeah.
That means using public transport,
Yeah.
walking, biking, carpooling, and even just, reducing the number of trips we make in the first place.
It's about being more mindful of our transportation choices
And
and their
it's-
impact on the environment and our communities.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that we're all in this together.
Well said.
and that the choices we make about how we get around have ripple effects
Right.
that extend far beyond our own personal convenience.
This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive.
It has. It's a big topic.
It really is.
A lot to unpack.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, just the tip of the iceberg.
But I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so.
And hopefully we've inspired them to, engage in this conversation
Yeah, get involved.
and help shape the future of transportation.
Absolutely. It's going to take all of us working together to create the kind of transport future that we want.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you again for joining us
Oh, thank you for having me.
and for sharing your insights.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
And we'll see you next time.
Until then, safe travels.